going to be your perimedium. Remember, your muscle fiber is your muscle cell, and your muscle cell itself will be surrounded by, again, its own connective tissue, and this is going to be called endomedium. So each muscle fiber will be surrounded by this green structure here. And this is endomedium. Okay, so just to make sure we understand, to review, okay, you have a bunch of these muscle fibers that they themselves are surrounded by this connective tissue called what? Endomedium. If you have a whole bunch of these muscle fibers and then surround it with perimedium, we call it a what? A fascicle. Then you take a bunch of fascicles and then you wrap them in epimedium, okay, then we call it your muscle. Is this making sense? Hopefully all kind of a review, okay? If not, well, let's keep going. We'll be okay. So what we're looking at here is, again, here's a muscle body, that meaty part of your muscle. If you open this up, so here, each one of these is a fascicle. Okay, so each one of these is a fascicle. So this whole thing is going to be your muscle. And your muscle is surrounded in this connective tissue. What is this called? Epimedium. Okay? Then your fascicles, they are also, they're basically made up of a bunch of muscle fibers. And your fascicle is surrounded by what type of connective tissue? Perimedium. And then you've got now your individual muscle fibers, or your muscle cells, and they themselves, the muscle cells, are surrounded by endomedium. Okay? It gets worse. I mean, it gets smaller inside. There's going to be these myofibrils and contractile filaments. But for now, that's where we're at. So let's go ahead and talk about your muscle fiber. So we're going to look at the muscle fiber itself, and we are going to talk about some structures that you're going to see, things like that. The first thing is the size of your muscle fiber is ridiculously long, okay? It's going to be the length of the muscle. So you've got this muscle cell that is, macroscopically long. Like you can see, you can measure the length of these muscle fibers, right? So they're very, very long, these long, long, long cylinders. That's the first thing. So it's generally going to run the length of the muscle. It's also going to be surrounded by something called the sarcolemma. Now, a lot of times students get a little bit confused here because they're like, wait, I thought it was surrounded by endomedium. Yes, your muscle fiber is surrounded by endomedium. That is connective tissue. The sarcolemma is just another name for the cell membrane. So your muscle fiber's cell membrane is now called the sarcolemma. And they're going to contain these little dips in the cell membrane, okay, in the sarcolemma, that's going to be called T-tubules. T-tubules are essentially transverse tubules, and they are continuous with the sarcolemma. They are dips into the interior of the cell. So, for example, what you are going to have here is, I'm going to draw a muscle fiber, just like large. So this whole thing is a muscle fiber. And your muscle fiber is going to have these dips in them. That basically kind of puncture and go inside. And that's what we're looking at. So this whole thing is your muscle fiber. Because it's a muscle fiber, we don't call the cell membrane anymore, so what do we call that? Sarcolemma. Okay, so this part over here, this is your sarcolemma. And then each of these dips in here, what are they called? T-tubules, okay? The major function of your T-tubules we're going to see a little bit later. It's going to send an electrical impulse towards the internal part of the muscle fiber as we, kind of get going through there. So this over here, this will be your T-tubules. All right. So the other thing you're going to find out is that within the muscle fiber, there's going to be more rods, right? These are going to be your myofilaments. So inside here, you're going to have more rods. I'll just draw a few of them. But you're going to have these rods in here. So these are going to be your myofilaments. No, myofibrils. Excuse me. Myofilaments are inside here, sorry. But we'll call these myofibrils. Okay, so we can see that over here as well. So if you were to see smaller circles inside, these are going to be called myofibrils. Again, myofibrils. Okay? Questions so far? Here's what we're looking at. This whole thing now is a muscle fiber. Therefore, this cell membrane is also called a what? Sarcolemma. When you're following the sarcolemma, if you look on the surface, there are these green punctures. You see that? These green punctures? These are basically puncturing into, just like puncturing into here. Therefore, they are called what? T-tubules, okay? Within your muscle fiber, you have a bunch of these myofibrils. Sorry, myofibrils. I had said myofilaments earlier. That's something else. These are myofibrils, excuse me. Okay? So these are your myofibrils, which are these rods over here. And then, let us continue. We're then going to look at your myofibrils. So these guys over here. So your myofibrils are these rod-like structures, okay? And these rod-like structures are going to be surrounded by something else as well. This is going to be surrounded by sarcoplasmic reticulum. Go ahead and say that. Sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is the exact same thing as endoplasmic reticulum, okay? It's just endoplasmic reticulum for the muscle cell. So the muscle cell is weird. We don't call it a muscle cell, we call it a muscle fiber. We don't call it a cell membrane, we call it a what? Sarcolemma. We don't call it an endoplasmic reticulum, we call it a sarcoplasmic reticulum. And the sarcoplasmic reticulum, or SR, is going to wrap around your myofibrils, which I will draw right now. So here's your myofibrils, and they are going to have a bunch of this kind of green, I'm going to draw this green. This is all going to be endoplasmic reticulum, but it's really called sarcoplasmic reticulum. Wrapped around here. So this is your sarcoplasmic reticulum. All over all of these, okay, so same idea. Wrapped all over here, okay, etc. Green dot here. There you go. So that's going to be your sarcoplasmic reticulum. The key thing you want to remember about the sarcoplasmic reticulum is that it stores calcium, okay? So it stores calcium in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and calcium is going to be very important for muscle contraction, as you may know, but if not, you will see. So it's very important that the sarcoplasmic reticulum is close to the myofibrils, specifically on top of the myofibrils. Now, the number of myofibrils can change with use. So right now, this cell looks like it has 3 myofibrils. If I continue to contract this cell over and over again, it's going to say, hey, I probably need more myofibrils. And therefore, it will split, and then you will have more myofibrils. So this is the idea of what working out does. So when you go to the gym, and you're just doing a standard workout, and you're trying to build, what you're really doing is generally not increasing the number of muscle fibers. You're going to be increasing the number of myofibrils within each muscle fiber. So each muscle fiber gets bigger. Does that make sense? So that's the idea. You're increasing the number of these holes. Okay. Within your myofibrils, you're going to have contractile filaments. So I'm going to draw these black filaments that are going to be within here. And they are generally going to repeat over and over. Okay. Later, you're going to see how they're arranged in the sarcomere and all of that. But these are going to be your contractile filaments. Okay. Sorry. Before we go on, I do want to point out a couple of different things. There's sarcoplasmic reticulum that's going to be found on the myofibrils, but you will also see some sarcoplasmic reticulum over here. And over here. So in between these different tubules as well. And this is going to be important once we get to the physiological portion of it. Okay, let's take a look at this. So this is one myofibril. Okay, so here's your myofibril. Within the myofibrils, you have these 2 types of filaments. They are both considered contractile filaments. But there's what we call the thin filaments in dark blue, and then there's the thick filaments in red. We're going to later see that these guys are going to arrange themselves in this specific pattern. You guys probably already know this as a sarcomere. Should be nothing new if you remember anatomy, and that can be divided into different zones. We're going to see that in a little bit. But the general idea is this is, again, your myofibril, and they're going to be composed of a bunch of thin and thick filaments. Together, they are called contractile filaments. You may have learned them as myofilaments in anatomy. Same thing. Okay, let's talk about these contractile filaments. So, with the contractile filaments, so with the contractile filaments, so they're going to be arranged in a way to form that sarcomere, right? This repeating, these repeating patterns over and over, right? And your sarcomere is going to be your, what we call the contractile unit, meaning that when a sarcomere contracts, that means it's going to shorten, okay? So you're going to see how that happens, but when that shortens, then the myofibrils will shorten. When the myofibrils shorten, the muscle fiber shortens. When that shortens, the fascicle shortens. When that shortens, the muscle shortens. So it's all about these sarcomeres, right? So you're going to see these sarcomeres and the structure of that. Okay. So there are 2 major types of contractile filaments. We had said there was your thin filament and your thick filament. We're going to go ahead and start with the thin filament first, and we'll probably be able to go through that today. So let's go ahead and open up your thin filament.